Hello there guys, and welcome to another one of my reviews. I know it's been a while, but today we are driving one of my favorite cars out there today. If you've been watching my channel for a long time, you probably figured out that I'm not exactly a huge SUV fan. I know this body shape has taken over the world recently. For example, over here in Europe, I don't know where you're watching from, but over here in Europe, last year, 2023, was the first year when the SUV body type was the best-selling one on the market. So over 51% of the cars sold in Europe last year were SUVs of different shapes and sizes. And that shows exactly where the customers are at right now, what they want, and so on. And that's why Alfa Romeo launched the Stelvio back in 2016. That's when it was initially unveiled, and it went on sale in 2017. It was a move that was absolutely necessary to keep up with the competition and the customer demand. And this car, so as I said, I'm not a fan of SUVs, but if I were to ever buy one, this would be it. This is my favorite SUV of them all. And today we're going to talk about what exactly made me say this, and how the Stelvio was made, and what makes it so special. To begin with, let's talk about how this car came to be. So it's the brainchild of a certain man called Sergio Marchionne. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2018. But before he did, he had an ambition. And his ambition was to put Alfa Romeo back where it belonged. Because for the past 30-something years, Alfa Romeo hadn't built a rear-wheel drive car, even though this is the way the first Alfa Romeo models were built up until the 80s. So in the 90s, they started making front-wheel drive cars as they passed under the Fiat umbrella. And Sergio wanted to return to the old push rather than pull system. And in order to do that, he allocated a huge chunk of money so that things could be done right. In that regard, the platform that sits at the base of the Stelvio and the Giulia is called Giorgio. And this platform is a rear-wheel drive platform and was developed in collaboration with certain mechanics from a certain sister brand of Alfa Romeo. Care to guess what that is? Yes, I'm talking about Ferrari. Ferrari actually helped with engineers and some tinkering done with the engines, but the platform itself was done by Ferrari engineers. And we're talking about a rear-wheel drive platform with a very interesting suspension that uses a double wishbone setup at the front and a multi-link setup at the back. Alfa Romeo calls it a 4.5 link multi-link suspension, but it's basically a 4-link, and one of the arms goes both ways. Don't focus on that. The point is, this is a multi-link platform with a rear-wheel drive setup, and it is absolutely brilliant. They managed to use this platform for the Giulia and the Stelvio, and both cars are stellar in their segments in terms of driving dynamics and feel, and that's no mistake. I mean, after all, the 458 is one of the best driving Ferraris, and the engineers that worked on that car have worked on this one as well. When you think about BMW and its M models, you think about Albert Biermann over the last, I don't know, 30 years. And then you saw what happened with Kia, for example, and Hyundai, once Biermann moved to the Hyundai Kia group, right? The N models, the Stinger, and so on. He was able to put together some rather brilliant cars. It's the same example here with Alfa Romeo and Ferrari. We have a brilliant driving chassis. But I'm going to talk about that a bit later on. For now, let's talk about the Stelvio itself. What is it? It's an SUV. It's a D-segment SUV. It's a mid-size SUV, depending on the market you're in, that rivals cars like the BMW X3, the Mercedes-Benz GLC, or the Audi Q5, in order to give you a perspective of the size of it. It's almost 4.7 meters long, and it has a wheelbase of about 2.8 meters. So it's a rather biggish car that has a design inspired by all other Alfas. So When you look at it, you cannot mistake it for any other car brand. It has a unique identity, and that's another thing I love about the Stelvio and Alfas in general. They have perfect design. If there's something Italians know, that's design. And the front end of this car is unmistakably Alfa. You have the huge center grille with the logo inside it. You have the double grills at the bottom, and you have the headlights. Now, the Stelvio has been in production since 2017, so it did receive a couple of upgrades in the meantime. It actually received two facelifts. And the first one wasn't that huge in terms of styling. The second one did change a couple of things. For example, as you can see, this car has completely new headlamps with a new design with three almost squarish shapes that remind us of the Tonale and of course of the Zagato concept. But apart from the design, they also include now a LED technology, which is necessary today. Up until this facelift, the Stelvio only had bike xenon lights up front, and it was starting to be an issue for customers who uses xenon lights these days. So yeah, now we have LEDs. They do come as standard. On the back side of the car, you do have a new set of tail lamps. They are now transparent and smoked. I'm not exactly a fan of them, but I don't mind them either. It's okay. The rear end also comes with a different bumper depending on the model you go for, the spec you go for. If you go for the Veloce version, that will depend on the market you're in. I don't know if you have the Veloce in your market. It's not available everywhere. In some places it might have different names like Sportiva and stuff like that. But the point is, if you get this sportier design package, you will have two tailpipes at the back and a diffuser on the rear bumper. So that's about it on the outside. On the inside, as you can see, it's a very simple layout, and I like that about the Stelvio. I'm not a big fan of huge screens inside the cars, and I've said it a number of times. The first thing that will be outdated inside when we're talking about the interior of any car out there, the first thing that will be aging is the display in one way or another. So the fact that we have two rather small displays in here is okay with me. The facelift did introduce a new instrument cluster. The old model had an analog cluster. This one has a digital display, 12.3 inches with 3 different versions of graphics. It looks okay. I like the retro styled one the most. And we have an 8.3 inch display over here for the infotainment system. Now, this is the biggest issue I have with this car. The infotainment system is definitely not up to par with modern day alternatives. It's not the size of the thing. As I said, I'm not a fan of huge displays. I wouldn't like a bigger display. I actually like the way this is integrated into the overall design of the car, but I would have liked it to be a bit faster in the way it responds to your inputs, and I would have liked a better resolution for it. Luckily, you have Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, so that's going to solve a lot of issues, and you do have this controller over here that helps you navigate through the various vertical widgets that this system has. So not a big issue, but it is an issue, and it will be for some customers. The seats are absolutely comfortable, and they do support you a lot. And my favorite thing about this car is, of course, the steering wheel. This, in my book, is the best steering wheel in the business right now. It is the perfect thickness. It looks absolutely brilliant, and I simply love it. And I also love the fact that you have a start-stop button on it right here. Now, I'm sure you're not here for me to point out rather obvious things, but you're here to find out about the way this car drives. Well, as I said, the platform is rear-wheel drive. It uses a number of engines so if you're a fan of diesels, I wouldn't get one, but okay. You have a 2.2 liter diesel available with 190 and 210 horsepower, depending on your preference. Then you have petrol choices, 2 liter and 2.9 liter versions. The 2 liter is available with 200 horsepower or 280 horsepower. And the 2.9 liter is a V6 derived from the Ferrari 458 V8 with 2 turbochargers inside the hot V. It develops 510 horsepower. So that's the Big Daddy, that's the QV version, and that is the car that went faster around the Nürburgring than the Porsche Cayenne Turbo S, for example. It is a very fast car. It was only beaten by the Urus and the RS-Q8. Yeah, it's really fast. It's faster than a BMW X6M on the Nürburgring, not in a straight line. So that's what you get. This one is a 2-liter, 280 horsepower Veloce version. So it will do 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 5.7 seconds. And this is the ZF 8 HP gearbox that we've seen on a number of cars, from BMWs to Range Rovers and so on, including Alfa Romeo. So it's a brilliant gearbox. It uses a torque converter, but it does respond to your inputs rather brilliantly, and it does have almost a mechanical feel to it whenever you shift gears manually. And in order not to do so using these great pedals on the back of the steering wheel, on the steering column made of aluminum, would be a shame. So let's talk about other things. For example, why does this car drive so good? You probably heard a lot of people praising its steering. That's something the Giulia and the Stelvio have been very much praised for, and that's because they have a different setup compared to any other car on the market. So I already told you the suspension is a double wishbone at the front. It's not a McPherson. But what makes it special is the fact that it uses the anti-Ackermann principle, which is used by F1 cars as well. What that means is, you know, in all modern day cars, I mean 90% of them, obviously not all of them, whenever you turn into a corner, the inside wheel will turn a bit more in order to compensate for the difference in the axis of the circles that the car actually draws whenever you turn. So the inside wheel will turn faster and more than the outside wheel, and that it's called the Ackermann principle. Now, in this car though, you have the anti-Ackermann principle, which basically means that the outside wheel will turn more in order to allow you to turn into a corner. And that changes everything. That makes the car a lot more eager to turn and makes the car a lot better to drive overall. And it is quite an impressive feat. So when you drive the car, you will be amazed at how fast it turns and how eager it is to turn. You don't have a lot of feedback in the steering wheel because this is still an electronically assisted system, but the way the car turns is absolutely amazing in my book. This car also has the Q4 all-wheel drive system. What does that mean? It means that at its core, it's still an all-wheel drive car, but it has a transfer box, and the car will drive like a rear-wheel drive model, like 99% of the time. It will only shift power to the front wheels whenever it feels slippage. Chip in the fact that this particular tester has a limited slip differential at the rear end, which is an optional feature, and you get a car that is incredibly eager both to turn in and to get you out of a tight corner. And boy, does it deliver. It is absolutely brilliant. If you push it into a corner, it will oversteer easily, but you do have to turn off the traction control because it will cut in a number of times. But overall, it steers so beautifully and it is so balanced. By the way, this car has a 50-50 weight distribution, and if you open up the hood, you'll notice that this rather small 2-liter engine has been positioned towards the back of the car, so in such a way that it sits behind the front axle and as close to the interior as possible in order to distribute the weight evenly. Absolutely brilliant. Another fact that I like about this car is that it's light. Today, D-segment SUVs are expected to weigh 2 tons. This one doesn't. This one weighs just about under 1.7 tons. And that's because when developing the platform, Marchionne wanted to make it as light as possible because he knew cars. He knew that was essential. And they used a lot of aluminum in the manufacturing of this car. A lot of components are done of aluminum. That's why it also asks a premium whenever we're talking about configuring a car, Stelvio or a Giulia. They're not cheap cars, not by a long shot, but they deliver. Now, about the engine, I have to get back to the engine and the way it works. Now, the 2-liter units are using what is otherwise known as multi-air technology. What that means is that it has a single overhead camshaft, and where the other one was supposed to be, the intake camshaft was supposed to be, you have this technology that uses a solenoid that is activated using hydraulic pressure, and that actually adjusts the intake valves and their position continuously. It has a small ECU that does just that, depending on the traffic situation, the power requirements, and a lot of other factors. So what it can do is can open the valves at maximum lift if you want them to. It can adjust them to ignite early or late, and it can also open the valves more than once on a single cycle. And that is why it's called multi-air. Now, this technology has been around for quite some time, and Alfa Romeo models and Fiat models and so on, they've been using it for quite a while. They borrowed it to other manufacturers as well. But not exactly in the same shape. So Multiair is actually quite a unique technology. It has been around for a long time, but what it does is it makes sure that the valves are at the correct distance depending on the traffic situation and the driving conditions. And that is incredibly important because that also changes the way the engine responds to your input, and that combined with the twin scroll turbochargers helps out a lot. So the throttle response is impeccable, but Multiair also brings you an uplift in power, an uplift in torque, and a serious downgrade, if you want to, in terms of emissions, harmful emissions, especially NOx. So it is incredibly useful, and it actually makes the engine a lot simpler, a lot easier to build, and it is cheaper to build an engine with multi-air than one without, because it's a lot less complicated. So yeah, it works brilliantly combined with this gearbox that has been set up brilliantly, combined with the chassis that has been set up brilliantly. This delivers incredible performance, and it's no wonder that the QV versions with their carbon fiber prof shafts and so on, they deliver incredible performance overall. It's no surprise that happened. You should also get a small decrease in fuel consumption, but I haven't really seen that while experiencing the car. It's actually quite thirsty. During my time with it, the average fuel consumption is 12 liters per 100 kilometers covered. Now, around town, that figure goes up to about 14. On the highway, at 130 kilometers an hour, you should see about 10 to 11. And on B roads, depending on how fast you're going, but if you're keeping it, I had an average speed of about 70 kilometers an hour. It showed an average fuel consumption of 7 to 8 liters per 100 kilometers covered. So it's a rather thirsty car. The range you get from a fuel tank will vary between 400 and 700 kilometers. Once again, depending on the kind of roads you're using. But overall, it's quite an efficient car. Whew. It pulls so hard, and I love the way these paddle shifters feel and the way the gearbox responds. It does replicate a dual clutch gearbox rather nicely. So, what's the takeaway about the Stelvio? Well, I absolutely love it. It is the one SUV I would buy. Now, there are some things I didn't really like about it, but I think in the grand scheme of things, they don't really matter that much. And they are nitpicking things, you know, there isn't a perfect car out there that would tick all the boxes for all of us, you know. So we're enthusiasts and we do like certain things. For me, the most important two things about a car are the way it drives and the way it looks. Those are my two top things. That's why I have an Alfa Romeo Giulietta, for example, my personal car. For other people, the technology is more important. For other people, maybe the fuel consumption is more important. For other people, I don't know, the space inside is more important. But for me, those are the two most important things when I'm looking at buying a car. And this one ticks both of them perfectly. Sure, I would have liked a better screen. Not a bigger one, but a better one, right? A more advanced infotainment system. I would have liked the seats to be a bit more comfortable. I would have liked to get adaptive dampers in standard. I would have liked a bit more sound insulation. For example, at highway speeds, you do hear quite a lot of wind noise inside. But none of them bother me that much that I wouldn't buy this car. However, when it comes to other SUVs, the way they drive bothers me so much that I wouldn't buy them. I hope this analogy makes sense. Now, in terms of pricing, it depends on the market you're in and the version you get. Prices here in Eastern Europe start at roughly 57,000 euros, but you do get a lot of kit in standard. The Veloce trim seems to be the best mix of them all. And of course, it depends on what kind of engine you get. This car is priced at 63,000 euros, and I think it's worth every single penny. The rivals, as I already mentioned, X3, xDrive 30i, the Q5, the GLC, a lot of them. Maybe I would have liked a mid-level 6-cylinder engine under the hood. So I think the gap between this 280 horsepower version and the 510 one is quite huge. I would have liked a intermediate version, maybe a hybridized version of this 2-liter, or maybe a 6-cylinder V6 or straight 6, because there's plenty of room under the hood. But I know they don't have one. That would fill in those 230 horsepower gap with, I don't know, about 350 horsepower. That would have been a perfect choice for a lot of customers. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen, but it would have been very, very nice. This has been my review of the Alfa Romeo Stelvio Facelift 2, the second facelift. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And until next time, of course, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And tell me, which one in this segment would you take home? Until next time, don't forget to feed your passions.